Morning. My name is Terence Sikoryak. I get the awesome privilege to serve as a pastor here at Landmark. I don't even have words to tell you how just humbling that is on my soul. I can't explain it. Humbling doesn't even serve it correctly. It's just an awesome privilege. I also run the ministry, This One Voice. For all the voices we hear in our heads, and some as early as we can remember, we recognize that those voices, where those voices come from, and we utilize tools to break the self-sabotaging patterns of those voices in our lives. You know, I get to look at the pattern of me being me, right? Which ain't so great sometimes. So every Tuesday night we meet on Zoom, and we help you break the habit of being yourself. I also do a radio show. I've been doing a radio show for 27 years. It's called This One Voice. And I run the congregational care team. And the congregational care team is really about you, us serving you. It's God's love in action. We do hospital visits. We have grief share. We bring meals to people. We visit you in the hospital. We have counseling. We have a large section of resources that we can refer you to. We do some coaching. And we just sit. If you want to come in, we just sit and we'll talk to you. So the care team, we now have 48 members, 48 volunteers for the care team. It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. You guys are great. And I'm not a good basketball player. So William was asking me, Terence, do you have game? I was like, I didn't have game at 21. At 67, I'm pretty sure that hasn't changed. So this morning, I trust that you all had a happy Thanksgiving. Everybody have a happy Thanksgiving? Yes. The Green Bay Packers won, okay? Yes. Everything tasted better after that. I'm a Green Bay Packer fan, and it just made my day. It started out to be, this is going to be a horrible day. They're going to get killed. But they won. They dominated. And I love the holiday season. I just love it. There's a buzz about the holiday season ever since I was a little kid. And my friend in California used to say, Christmas, it's a scam. You don't even know when Jesus was born. It's like, I don't care. Christmas is great. It's a great season, isn't it? It's a wonderful season. And I said, you take the greatest season and just make it a bummer. That's good for you. There's a superpower in that, right?
It's the most wonderful time
of the year, right? As Gene's going to sing and I'm going to dance. And then the place will clear out. But Thanksgiving dinner is so important. There's a study by Harvard University that says families eating together has dramatic health effects. It's so great. It benefits our health so much. Now, let me ask you a question. How many of you have accepted last month's challenge to read a proverb a day? How many? No hands. 2 hands. All right. So I encourage you to grow in godly wisdom. Read a proverb a day. There's 31 chapters in Proverbs. Read 1 chapter a day. It's hard if you miss a day. Go to the next day. And then at the end of the month, go all the way back to 1. I've been doing that for 46 years. And it's amazing that every time I read through it, I'll be like, I've been reading this for 46 years. I don't remember ever reading this passage before. It's amazing. But today is Proverbs 26. And in Proverbs 26, it says, don't answer a fool according to his folly, or you'll just look like a fool. Have you ever done that? You're just like, you're standing there, you're like, I'm talking to an idiot. And it's just is knowing nowhere. And now I'm looking like an idiot for going down this rabbit hole with him. So I want to recap what I spoke about last month when we started Proverbs chapter 1, verses 1 through 7. We looked at worldly wisdom and godly wisdom, and there's a difference. And in the letter of James, he says to examine the origin, the operation, and the outcome of the wisdom. Is your reasoning influenced by the world, your flesh, or by the devil? And how can you tell? So James tells us that worldly wisdom brings bitterness and selfish ambition. And it produces chaos, disorder, and division. But godly wisdom, James says, produces purity, peace, consideration, submissiveness. It's full of mercy and good fruit, impartiality, and sincerity. It's not filled with hypocrisy. And it's not that worldly wisdom is completely useless, but we must be cautious because worldly wisdom does not recognize Jesus Christ. And lastly, we saw last month where Solomon finishes off the first section. He says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and fools despise wisdom and instruction. Reverence and awe must permeate every part of our lives. You know, it says the fear of the Lord. It's not a scaredy cat fear, right? It's an awesome dread. I don't fear gravity, but I don't go too close to the edge, right? Because I respect it, because I know it always works, doesn't it? There's never a day where, hey, gravity's not working. It always works, all the time, and it always ends up the same way. And so I don't fear it. I don't walk around afraid of gravity, but I'm in awe of it. I understand its power. J.I. Packer, in his book, Knowing God, he says, God's wisdom is not, and never was, pledged to keep a fallen world happy or to make ungodliness comfortable. Not even to Christians has he promised a trouble-free life. Rather, the reverse. He has other ends in view for life in this world than simply to make it easy for everyone. The Lord is the giver, the creator, and the judge of wisdom. And the book of Proverbs tells us that the Lord is the creator of the earth and all that is in it. And Proverbs 16:4 says, the Lord has made everything for its purpose, even the wicked for the day of trouble. It also tells us that the Lord is the judge of human behavior. Proverbs 21:2, it says, every person's way is right in his own eyes, right? But the Lord examines the hearts. And lastly, it says that the Lord is worthy of sincere worship and serious faith. Proverbs 3:3-6 says, do not let kindness and truth leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart, so you will find favor and good reputation in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Paul House, in his book, Old Testament Theology, says, Proverbs teaches us that respect for the Lord ignites, supports, and defines faithful living. And so today we will finish up on chapter 1. So we go from verses 8 through 33. If you go to your book, Proverbs chapter 1, and we'll be looking at verses 8 through 33. And in this passage here, Solomon introduces us to three voices that are always active in our lives. And the key is, who do we decide? Who do we decide to listen to? There is the voice of instruction, the voice of temptation, and the voice of salvation. And if you read the book of Proverbs, you see all through the book there are actually two prominent voices that call out to us. It's the voice of wisdom and the voice of folly. And they are always calling out to us. And the voice we listen to determines the direction and ultimately the destination of our lives. It's just the way it works. I have this teaching that I use, the 9 Ds. And I was telling my friend, I have this teaching, it's called the 9 Ds. And they're like, what's so good about the 9 Ds? I said, not the 9 Ds, the 9 Ds. And they are decisions drive direction. Direction determines destination. And destination demands diligence. And really, that's the only information that you need. You decide which voice you listen to, and that determines the direction of your life. If we look at the voice of instruction that Solomon tells us, In verse 8 it says, "Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Indeed, they are a graceful wreath to your head and ornaments about your neck." In this passage, the parents, as parents, alert our children to pay attention. It's the same advice we give our children all the time, right? It's the voice of godly parents' instruction gives value to our lives. The voice of godly parents' instruction makes our lives more attractive. And listening to the voice of godly parents brings honor not only to our parents, but to the gospel of God. Be mindful of the company you keep, right? That's the voice of instruction from our parents. If you keep lower company, it will lead to tragedy. That's just true, isn't it? Disasters attract disasters. If I'm a disaster, I'm going to attract healthy, well-formed people are not going to hang around with a disaster. And disasters don't want healthy people around either. They take away from the fun. And it sounds a lot like Psalm 1, the warning from the psalmist in Psalm 1. Don't walk in step with the wicked. Don't stand in the way of sinners, and don't sit with the company of mockers, in which we see there's this retrogressive pattern of behavior. See, the thing is, my pastor told me years ago in California, when you tolerate sin, it's just a matter of time until you embrace it. And based on decisions which drive the direction of our lives, look, he says, don't walk with them. And walking is a rather loose association, isn't it? I'm just walking. I'm walking with this guy. He's an interesting guy. When I walk, I'm just testing the waters of disobedience. Standing, now I'm hanging out. I'm a little tighter now, right? I'm joining in a little bit more. I'm not walking anymore. I'm standing around. I'm giving folly more time and more attention. And then finally, when I'm sitting, I'm in. I've told the story here before about there was a table in my cafeteria in high school, which I sat at, which you just didn't sit there. As a matter of fact, you had to make a lot of bad decisions to get at that table. And you didn't just wander in, "Hey guys, how you doing?" And everybody knew that table was trouble. And when you're sitting at that table, you are in. And our parents warned us about those kids, right? Those kids. Hey, stay away from those kids. Don't talk to those kids. Don't hang around with those kids. Those kids are trouble. And that was great advice until I was one of those kids. I knocked on my friend's door one night, and he said, "My mother doesn't want me to hang around with you anymore." It was a subtle transformation. I was walking, I was standing, then I was sitting. And I became one of those kids. But when we listen to the godly advice, the instruction of our parents, our lives look more attractive. It says, "Indeed, they are a graceful wreath to your head and ornaments about your neck." The wise advice of a parent, listen kids, the wise advice of a parent is like fine jewelry. It's incredibly valuable. It makes you look good. If you want your life to look attractive, make good decisions. Follow wise instruction. And look, I would tell my kids, listen, you have no idea the advantage you have, me being your dad. It's true, though. I have made all the mistakes. I've gone down the wrong road. I've hung around with those guys. I've been that guy. You just don't realize the advantage you have, the history, the value, the experience that I bring. Look at my gray hair. I mean, I've lived some. You know, John Maxwell says, we should be older and wiser. Sometimes old shows up alone, and we leave out wise. But those who actively use wisdom of their parents and reflect it in their lives, it brings honor to your parents, doesn't it? Other people will notice the wise choices, the wise behavior, wise words, Just as someone will notice the jewelry that you wear. They'll notice, that's a wise kid, man. And when I was running with the wrong guys, we had a lot of fun. It was fun. Disobedience was fun and funny. I could tell you some stories. They are funny. Wild situations we got in. That's why it was so attractive. It was funny. It was fun. Until somebody died. Or until somebody got arrested. Or until somebody got into an accident. See, Mike Tyson says, I'm quoting Mike Tyson, it's just so great. This is the greatest quote ever. Everyone has a plan until someone gets punched in the face. I love that, right? I got a plan to beat him. I was telling my children once about, some of the crazy things I did before I was a Christian and some of the people who ruined their lives and their parents' lives. See, we can affect our families for generations by the poor choices that we make. And so my son asked me, and with a lot of this, drugs were involved. And so my son asked me one day, hey, Dad, what was the worst drug you ever did? I said, Josh, you know what, I don't want, I laugh about that because some of that stuff is funny, but the fact of the matter is that Terence is dead. He's gone. I don't want to talk about him. And he said, no, Dad, really, what was the worst you did? I said, you know what, Josh? The worst drug I ever took was the first drug I ever took. Because you know what? We had some fun, but we had some tragedy. And I brought trouble to my home and sorrow to my mother's heart. And a man doesn't do that. And I regret that. My behavior at that time certainly wasn't a beautiful piece of jewelry that my mom was wearing. It was more like an albatross. Anybody ever read the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner? I had to read that in college. And the sailor kills an albatross, just flagrantly, just kills an albatross, this beautiful animal. And the sailors with him make him wear the dead albatross. His behavior, he has to wear, everybody to see. So my behavior became like an albatross to my mother. You don't want to be that for your parents or for the gospel. The Apostle Paul says, if we live holy, righteous lives, our behavior adorns the gospel. There's people who look at you and say, man, I want some of that. What's he got? I want to live that way. I want that life. You adorn the souls of our parents and the gospel by good behavior. The second voice we listen to is the voice of temptation. In Proverbs 1, 10 through 14, it says, my son, if sinners entice thee, do not consent. If they say, hey, come with us, let's lie in wait for blood, let's ambush the innocent without cause. Let's swallow them alive like Sheol, even whole like those who go down to the pit. We will find all kinds of precious wealth. We will fill our houses with plunder and throw in your lot with us. We will have one money bag. The voice of temptation offers three empty promises. Number one, the promise of excitement. Number two, the promise of belonging. Be one of the guys. Come on, throw in your lot with us. And the promise of wealth. The promise of excitement. When I was in high school, there was a group of my friends who were breaking into houses and robbing people. And they didn't have a plan or a system. These guys we'd be walking down the road. They say, hey, that house is dark. Let's break into that house. The sixth sense of excitement. And when they first started, we were walking home from Roosevelt Field. Anybody knows Long Island? Roosevelt Field. It was right around Christmas, right around this time of year. And they saw a house that was dark, and they said, well, we're going to break into that house. And me and my friend Bill Stack, we said, well, I don't want anything to do with that. We're not going in there. And they said, okay, if you don't want to come in, keep watch. You guys keep watch. And I said, I'm not going in. I'm not keeping watch. I'm going home. I don't want anything to do with this. They're like, come on, man. Throw in with us. Where are you running from? Don't you want to belong? The National Institute of Mental Health says that peer pressure is amazing for teenagers. It said it might lead teens to take more risks because of the social benefits. Be one of the guys, come on. Outweigh the possible consequences of a decision. You're not one of the guys if you refuse. And what could be worse than not being one of the guys? Now these guys, you don't want to be one of these guys. These guys that I hung around with. You know, they say there's honor among thieves. There was no honor among these guys. They'd come to a party at your house and they'd break into your mom's bedroom and steal. And if a thief had honor, he wouldn't be stealing from other people. To throw in your lot with the thieves, to throw in your lot with the fools or the mockers, and to trust them is a foolish thing to do. And the consequences are dire. You see, this false sense of wealth that this promised them, these guys had money. For a long time, they had money, they had new bikes, they were spending, they were going to restaurants, they were going to movies. As a matter of fact, one of them was throwing coins one day in the park. And it went on for a while until one day I came home from school and my mom stopped me at the door and showed me the New York Newsday, which is the Long Island paper. And the names of all of these guys were on the front page. All Long Island knew who they were. They were crooks. And they brought dishonor to their families. And then my mom knew the names because she knew I hung out with these guys even since I was little. And she wanted to know if I was involved. But there was one gigantic reason why I was not involved. One gigantic reason, the instruction of my mother and the prayers of my mother. See, my mom had enough trouble in the house without me adding to it. And I explained to her. I was there at times that they broke into houses, but I never participated. And I didn't keep watch. And I assured her that it was her that kept me from trouble. As I heard that voice of instruction, and I did not want to bring any more trouble to my mother's house. And my friends, it was their own behavior that became the trap for them. Solomon says, but they lie in wait for their own blood. They ambush their own lives. Whenever my friends would go out for the night, my mom would always say, it's funny, we'd be leaving for the night and my mother would say, hey, remember, the piper always gets paid. Anybody understand what that means? There's an old saying, if you want to dance, you got to pay the piper. And my mother would say, hey, the piper always gets paid. And when it's time to pay the piper, it's time to accept the consequences of thoughtless and rash action. Too many people sacrifice the permanent for the immediate, and that is such a bad investment. Don't fool yourself. Don't ever fool yourself. The piper always gets paid. He may take a while, but he always comes to collect. You want to dance? You better be prepared to pay the piper. We had a saying in the emergency room when I was in college. I worked in an emergency room to get through college, and we had a saying. The one doctor would say, only people out carousing after midnight are drunks, crooks, and dummies. Now, occasionally you're out after midnight, but if you're not one of those drunks, crooks, and dummies, you're probably going to run into one. You want to avoid that. Listen to the voice of instruction. And finally, he has the voice of salvation. In Proverbs 1, 20 through 33, Solomon says, wisdom is always warning us. We're introduced to the most important character in the book of Proverbs here in this section. Where is wisdom speaking? To whom is wisdom speaking? And what is wisdom speaking? Wisdom shouts in the street, it says. She raises her voice in the public square. At the head of the noisy streets, she cries out. At the entrance of the gates in the city, she declares her sayings. Wisdom is a woman, Solomon portrays her at, and so is folly. And the call of wisdom is always there. Look, he's saying it's everywhere. Just like temptation is always nudging us, wisdom is always calling us. The voice of God even calls out to us from nature. We have no excuse. For since the creation, Paul says, since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, that is his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived, being understood by what has been made, so that they are without excuse. I read a lot of books on the brain. Not because I use mine a lot, but I want to know. It's like an owner's manual, you know? Here's how your brain works. And when you look at how the brain works, just forget the rest of the anatomy of the body. It's amazing to just say that just happened. Look, that takes a lot more faith than I have. I've got to believe that somebody created that. You cannot look at nature and say there is no God. There is this all-pervasive calling, and so we are without excuse. And to whom is wisdom speaking? It says, how long, O naive ones, will you love being simple-minded, and scoffers delight themselves in scoffing, and fools hate knowledge? Wisdom is speaking to the simple, to the fool, and to the scoffer. And the simple are those who will believe anything. Have you ever spoken to that person? Have you ever spoken to that person and you're like, you have any idea how insane you sound? I mean, I would not skip my medication next time before I start a conversation with you. That's the simple. They will believe anything. They will go down with a guy who calls himself God, and they will drink the Kool-Aid. The simple will believe anything. And then there's the fool. He's determined to stay stuck in his own folly. Only a fool takes pleasure in understanding, Solomon says, but only in expressing his own opinions. The fool just likes to hear his own voice, just like to hear himself speak. While the simple are not closed their mind to God, they are easily led astray. But the fool has closed his mind to God unless God says what the fool says. You know, I have my friend says, Jesus never said whatever. And I say, I'm surprised you know anything that Jesus said. But, he also said, I'm the truth, the way, the truth, and the life. So, how does that affect you? In Barbara Tuchman's book, The March of Folly, what a great book. Read this book, The March of Folly. She takes a look at governments and administrations all through history that will pursue policies that are contrary to their own interests, even when it becomes evident it is contrary to their own interests. You ever know this person? A person who's proud and stubborn and continues on a road that is totally against their own interests, but they're going to continue because they've gone that way. That's the way they're going. Stupid, yes. I didn't want to say stupid. I thought that was too harsh, but thanks, Gene. These people who continue on the road, there's an old saying, a bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you refuse to turn. And there are people who will just go right off the road and then curse the road. Hey, why did I bend there? You're supposed to turn a little bit. Foolish people do not turn. Obey the red flags, right? If there's a boat on fire with red flags and it's going over a waterfall, you get out of that boat. It doesn't mean, look, there's an old saying, the red flags don't mean it's a carnival. It means it's a disaster. But fools refuse to turn. And then lastly is the mocker. The mocker's not interested, the mocker is only interested in hearing himself talk. But the mocker wants to convert others as well. Solomon describes the mocker as an abomination to mankind. Satan's the ultimate mocker, isn't he? What does he say? Did God actually say, you shall not eat of any fruit of the garden? Did he really say that? Does God really love you? If God loved you, he wouldn't hold you back. He'd open everything for you. Or if you eat the fruit, you'll surely not die. God has been lying to you the whole time. But if we're not careful, we will regress from simpleton to fool to mocker. Tremper Longman, in his commentary on Proverbs, says the problem with these three groups of people is that they relish their present state of ignorance. They're comfortable in it. They not only tolerate it, but they embrace it wholeheartedly as communicated by the verbs love and delight themselves. What stops us from listening to the voice of wisdom. The voice of wisdom says to us, turn to my reproof. Behold, I will pour out my spirit on you. I will make my words known to you. It's encouraging us to listen. God's spirit is beckoning us to hear. He says that I will pour out my spirit on you and open your eyes. Jesus says in John 16, 13 through 14, but when he, the Spirit of truth, comes, he will guide you into all truth, for he will not speak on his own. But whatever he hears, he will speak, and he will disclose to you what is to come. And what will be revealed? He will glorify me, Jesus says, for he will take from mine and disclose it to you. But those who persist in their rebellious ways, the voice of wisdom warns that disaster will come. And here's the thing, disaster doesn't come in a day. It takes a while, right? Guy says, I've been smoking for a week. I don't have cancer. I'm fine, right? It doesn't come in a day. It takes a while. And finally, in Proverbs 29:33, wisdom says, because they hated knowledge, they did not choose the fear of the Lord. They would not accept my counsel. They spurned all my reproof. So they shall eat of the fruit of their own way and be satiated with their own devices. For the waywardness of the naive will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. But he who listens to me shall live securely and will be at ease from the dread of evil. I was home. I moved from Long Island. I grew up on Long Island, and I moved to California, and that's when I became a Christian. And I was home back on Long Island one time on vacation, and I was out with my old friends one night at the corner where we used to hang out. It was just like, you guys have not changed. You still hang out in the same place. And there I was with them. And there was a whole group of us, and I was explaining to them what had happened. They were asking me questions. We heard you became a Moonie, and you following a cult or something. I was explaining to them about my conversion to Christianity. And there was one guy, this guy Mitty, and Mitty says to me, so Terence, you think you're better than us? You're no better than us, man. We know you. We know you, man. You're one of us. And so I was trying to explain to him that I didn't think I was better than them. And a voice from the back of the crowd, my friend Pete, he comes up and he goes, he is better than you, Mitty. He's following the Lord. He's going to college and he's working. You don't do any of those things. He's better than you, Mitty. I was like, I'm not better, I'm different. I'm in God's family now. I just belong to a different family. Wisdom is always calling us, calling for us. By the way, those two guys, Mitty is dead. He died of an overdose. And Pete, I still speak to every year, right around Christmas. Yeah, amen. Wisdom is calling for us always, calling for us to repent, calling for us to change our ways, calling to us to wisely choose our company, to choose our words, to choose our behavior. In the Westminster Catechism, it says, repentance unto life is a saving grace, whereby a sinner, out of a true sense of their sin, and apprehension of the mercy of God in Christ, does with grief and hatred of their sin, turn from it unto God with full purpose of and endeavor after new obedience. The direction of our lives is really driven by our decisions, who you decide to hang out with, what you decide to do. And for those who decide to listen to the voice of temptation and keep bad company, they will experience calamity. They just will. It won't come in one day, but it'll eventually come. Their names will be in Newsday. And the definition of calamity is an event causing great and often sudden damage or distress and a disaster. And it's not just for them, it's for their families as well. Their lives will be a disaster. Following the voice of temptation always ends poorly. It just does. It always does. And disaster, it says, will come like a whirlwind, a destructive storm, and everything in its path will be affected. It's not God judging us. It's not just the natural fruits of poor behavior. But for those who decide to listen to wisdom's call, they shall live securely, it promises, and they will be at ease from the dread of evil. And when we follow the voice of wisdom, we experience a sense of security in our lives. A peace, Paul says, that passes all understanding. A sense of well-being that comes from being in relationship with God. Now remember the 9 Ds and the decision to choose. And to sum up the 3 voices Solomon tells us about, always calling us. The voice of instruction, I'm sorry. Those wiser than us. You hear instruction here every Sunday, right? Last Sunday we heard the instruction. Pastor Matthew told us what it means to be biblically a man, a husband, and what it means to be a woman, a wife. I love that. Shared that with my son this week. The voice of instruction. Be mindful of the voice of temptation, always nudging us. Did God really say that? Is that really that bad? Come on, you want to be one of the guys? Throw in your lot with us. Those lives are headed for destruction. Or the voice of salvation. That wisdom calls for us to stay on the right path. That not only will our lives be adorned, but the lives of those around us will be adorned as well. And then the 9 Ds. You need to remember the 9 Ds, not the 90s. I don't know what happened in the 90s, but I was there, I just don't remember all that much of it. The 9 Ds, right? Decisions drive direction. The decisions you make will drive the direction of your life. The direction of your life will determine the destination, where you're gonna end up. And the destination demands diligence. If you're gonna stay in a good place, you must be diligent about staying there. Keep making good decisions. And how do you listen to God's voice? Listen, I challenge you again. Who will raise a hand and read a proverb a day? Will you promise that? It's not a big ask, right? I'm not asking you to fly an F-18. I'm asking you to read a proverb a day. Read a proverb a day. Now, before we end, there'll be prayer partners up front from the care team. And there will also be prayer partners in the foyer. So if you can't come up front, there's people wearing the lanyards that'll be in the foyer ready to pray with you. But listen, keep making good decisions. How do you listen to God, wisdom's voice? I challenge you again, read a proverb a day. And what is it, the 9 Ds? The 9 Ds. That's all you need to know. It's the 9 Ds, not the 90s. The 9 Ds. Somebody said, what about the light? I said, it's not the 47 Ds, it's the 9 Ds. You can make your own thing up. Thanks so much, guys. God bless you. And Merry Christmas.